York City. Calm. Most of its buildings are, well, they're all vertical, orthogonal. Some are curved, but some have one interesting tops, right? Very beautiful. But it's a calm background. And if you added a building by Mies van der Rohe, it would look something like this. It fits in quite beautifully. And then, we went, in Chicago decided to give us one of the buildings, and we added to the New York skyline. And then we had another one of Chicago's great buildings. Pei brought it back from Hong Kong and put it here in New York. Still looking pretty good. They're exciting. They're super tall. Pelly's building comes home. And even Foster lends his building from London to New York. We bring ours back from Shanghai, and it's taller than the others, but vertical, elegant. And even Dubai discovers it really shouldn't have this unless it be shipped to New York. That's the New York skyline, maybe 25, 30, 40, 100 years from now, but it's still vertical. Right? Interesting shapes. I didn't say you couldn't have everything didn't have to be a square or rectangle, but they are vertical. All right, let's talk about New York now under the new. This actually was built, this by Philip Johnson, John Bergey in Madrid. The idea was to create an arch, a gateway, and they were too far apart if they just stood this way. So the reason was, and it made some sense to lean them, but the floor plan, the structure, you can just get the sense of the cost of this structurally to lean those two buildings in that dimension. And then
I'm leasing that too.
Tough time.
I mean, it's still vacant.
Probably, I mean, it's really not. And then we decided to get a little fanciful. And all of a sudden, Australia sends Liebeskin's buildings here. And then that lovely project was built for. And Norman Foster's beautiful design for the World Trade Center, but it too has movement. The point is, every one of these buildings is doing something. Nothing is calm anymore. They're all like that. So you could end up, where you finally had Mies van der Rohe, it looks pretty good. I mean, you could say, well, this, nice profession to have a simple building. So that's the skyline. So, at the end of the class, I hold these up and I say, okay, which of the two would you like to live in? And anybody voting for the one on the left?
Depends if I was sober or drunk.
That's true. Very good. So on the left, all vertical. On the right, lots of activity. Anybody have any preference to the one on the right? You won't? Al will not give you a bad grade. Okay. I think that's it. So I'm happy to answer questions till it's time for you to leave, but it's 20 of
We got 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
If you want. Otherwise, we'll get out early.
There's a question over here.
Let me just apologize.
No. Question back there.
Hello? Can I call you back? Sorry. Yeah.
Question over there?
Have you, all the buildings you had on the right, have you visited any of those? Have you experienced any of the spaces that are inside?
Some of them, not all of them. Yeah.
What are they like?
Well, a lot of them aren't built yet, so it's hard to experience. But I've been in buildings that are lean, and I don't find that a pleasant experience. Because my mind is working saying, well, structure, that's expensive, and it doesn't make sense. So it doesn't mean it can't be exciting. If you had one building do that, you might say fine. It's you start doing a lot of them, and that's what was happening, that I find that the city would become chaos, and there's no order. I mean, when you get around cities, whether it's London, New York, Paris, there's a certain order you begin to understand, and the buildings help become the markers to help you to find them, and you feel more comfortable. These buildings would make you a little worried, I think, if they fall down. Yeah.
You talked at the beginning about the economics. Those structures on the right have to be more expensive.
Oh, they're far more expensive. I didn't even cover that, but you're absolutely right. I was ignoring cost. The cost for those were all staggering, every one. Anytime you have to do that to a building, you're going to pay a lot more.
I want to make the point that part answer Teffer's question over here. I don't know if you've been to the Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto. That's Liebeskin's museum. My own personal feeling is that inside it's disorienting. It's very confusing in terms of its circulation, just finding your way around, trying to figure out whether you have already been to that place or
good point.
if you get in. And so that's a problem in a museum. Actually, it's a problem in a lot of buildings. especially when you're in a museum, you want to have a sense that you've seen all the things there are to see, or at least have been able to make those choices. It's very difficult to find your way around. It is physically disorienting, and the daylighting is just accidental, is at best.
So the other problem is it wastes almost 25 feet of perimeter space because when the wall slopes, you can't walk to the edge because you're going to hit your head. So they've set back where you can go. And so the whole perimeter you can't use for exhibits and can't get close. So space-wise, it's terribly wasteful. Yeah.
Have you been in any of these where they feel like there's some reason on the inside that works? Because they do feel like personal sculptural statements without any kind of a person involved
Yeah.
using it.
Yeah, I'm sure that,
Yeah.
yes, I haven't, but I'm sure there's spaces that
There's
are
gotta be one
exciting
somewhere,
and,
yeah.
and work. Interior spaces you could make do that, but the building's responsibility in the cityscape, on the street, is the other thing that really shows. There's no question within any space you can make it quite exciting. But the building, as it relates to the pedestrian, to the cities, to my mind, is a big concern, yeah.
Do the buildings with the funny shapes, do those tend to use more energy to run, heat, cool, or is it about the same, it just costs more for structure?
Yeah, it's hard for me to comment because you'd have to do an analysis. And what it does, it will use more structure, which will cost
Right.
more. Yeah, no question. And the exterior wall is going to be more complex.
But similar to her comment, I was kind of thinking, why take this expense to make this icon when you can start to implement more technology towards energy to make an icon?
Well, I think in the years ahead, energy is going to dominate architecture, sustainability. And I think that will cause buildings to be simpler, but much more sensitive to the issues of sustainability. And you won't get those forms. You won't be able to afford that and the extra costs for the environmental issues. I think that may help us be smarter. Yeah.
Do you feel any particular pressure recently from corporate clients to make those aggressively shaped buildings? What's been your experience?
No, right now, no. We did a building in Philadelphia that hopefully was going to be Glaxo's headquarters. And it's pretty striking. It's 1,500 feet tall, an icon, vertical, but nevertheless interesting. And they're afraid to move in because it's too strong an image. And they're afraid they're going to be criticized for taking a front seat. And they wanted to stay where they are and hide. Corporations are definitely afraid to be too bold now, where before they were willing to do that. But now they're conservative. Both on the cost issue, but it's really more, they don't want to be seen as showing off, as being
Exorbitant, or spending too much money on.
Exactly, on their headquarters. So I think you're going to see, I doubt you'll find any new, in this country, any building that's going to be wild for a while. I just don't see it, including museums. I think even, well, raising money today is not easy for any of these events. And you would just not get the support for spending a fortune on a museum or any building. It's got to be well thought out, well done, and sensible architecture. Like Luke Kohn. I mean, I'm still a Luke Kohn fan, so having studied with him, and his sense and feeling about space and material and the coordination of mechanical, electrical, structural all together made great sense then and does now. Any other questions? Yeah.
Last semester, one of my classes were kind of talking about cap and trade, and I know it's becoming a sustainability issue. But you think of these buildings with these different shapes and forms, do you think it'll affect the actual carbon footprint?
Yeah, it was a similar question before. I don't know for sure because you'd have to test it. But my sense is it definitely could. Maybe increase it.
Now, are you familiar with cap and trade? I'm still trying to follow it myself, but it seems like when you say that these buildings curve, you're going to have this extra space that's being unused.
Yeah, that's efficient. You're wasting space with shapes that are not regular. But I think the bigger issue is just the cost of doing that, the form. And the question is whether, even architecturally, forget all the energy, dollars, is it architecturally appropriate for a city or not? One building maybe yes, but you know, in the old cities, the churches, the great cathedrals, were the sculpture. But they were also very beautifully done, and they weren't wild shapes. They may have been very ornate, but they were the buildings that really set off the cities and dominated the cities. So, but they didn't do crazy things. You never saw a church that was sloped. God would like it.
You know, what's striking about New York and the skyline you showed is that it's not any one building. The skyline is better because no one building calls attention to itself. It's what
Exactly.
the whole ensemble of buildings
No,
does,
absolutely.
and it's completely unpredictable. It's not pretentious because each one does something correct and simple, and it contributes to something you could never have predicted. It's less predictable than those supposedly unpredictable buildings.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. You know, but the icon was, the whole idea was it should stand out above everybody else. And then everybody should look at me, look at me. You know,
Well, then it just gets more
It
and
gets
more
crazy.
and more and more.
But if everybody's more sympathetic and care about the whole instead of each the part, then it's going to be a better city. Well, you've been a
5
great
more
client.
minutes.
5
Any more questions? I have one
You'll work this
comment
guy to
make.
death.
Well,
You oughta-
I
you oughta
can give you
go.
a preview about tonight. I'm
Yeah.
losing my voice, so hopefully I'll have it back
Yeah.
tonight.
You know, Gene, they ought to go, the class ought to get a chance to go over and look at a project that was it's been under construction now for about 2.5, 3 years, about 3 years. North of Square Lake Road, on the east side of Telegraph Road. There's a large project under construction there. It's not anymore, they stopped construction. It's a lesson in doing bad architecture, which relates to bad development and not accepted by anyone that wants to, as a tenant, that wants to go in this development. You should all look at it. It's a lesson in not what to do. If the banks give money, developers will build. There's no question. And they'll build anything they possibly can build if you give them money. Well, that's why one of the problems we have right now is a shortage of money. The money that we're given, that were loaned to the banks, so they should loan for housing and construction and so forth. They use that to buy their competitors. There was a consolidation of all these banks because if they have less competition, they figure they can do more business in the future. So they used up their money, and there's not a lot of money in the banks today. There's still plenty of money, don't misunderstand. But as to whether they want to gamble and invest in construction. But you all should get a chance to go and take a look at that development. They came to me and asked me what should be done. Tear it down. It has to be torn down. It's going to be very expensive to tear it down. There's any use for it. Badly planned, badly located, bad exposure. Everything about it is bad.
So anybody wants to buy it, don't bother. Okay, you've been a great class. Again, I want to say that you're lucky to have Al. He's, to me, one of my favorite people, and you will learn more from Al than you'll hear. So enjoy the rest of your time. And tonight, I'm going to talk a little about creating a global firm. Because I think as architects, it's interesting how you start firms, build them, and the impact of working globally, culturally, and business-wise. So, anyway.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Martin?
Do you want to say anything else, Professor Taubman? Do you want to add anything?
No, he said it all. I think it's interesting, those curved buildings. Well, they can do it core and take the elevators up on an angle. But the wear on that, the tear, from a practical point of view, I'm not sure that make it over. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week.